Hi YouTube, in this video we will talk about array. Well, array is a consecutive memory location and all the elements in an array must have the same data type. Let's say if I define integer array, so all the data must be integer, and consecutive memory location means that it occupy a space in a memory and in which we store the data. Let's say I defined size of an array 10, so it occupies 10 cells in a memory and it stores the data in that size, in that cells, and it has fixed size. When you define an array, it has fixed size. In this video we are going to study static array. There's another array which is known as dynamic array, and dynamic array we define the size of an array during runtime, but in static array we define during the coding of a program. And I just want you to show the picture in order to get the idea how array works. Okay, let's look at this picture in which the size of an array is 10, and I want you to learn the index. Index means that the starting point at index 0. Basically, index is representing the location. Let's say at index 0 I could have stored 1 or 2 or 5 or any value, and at index 1 I could store 2 or 3, so it has index 9. What happens that if I started from 1, so it reaches to the 10, because we know that the size of an array is 10, but I have started from 0. Basically we refers location from index 0. That's why 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And if you count from 1, we know that it has 10. It is equals to 10. So the size of an array is 10 and index is from 0 to 9. And the data which we stored in an index, it is known as element. Let's say if I stored any value in an index, so we will represent it that value is stored in that particular index. So if I'm going to store 25, so I'm going to represent that at index 0 I have stored 25. Now let's write a program so you might have a better understanding how array. Okay, to define array, in this example we are using integer, so I'm going to define integer array, and now I'm going to write the name of an array. Let's say that array or A. So the name of array I have assigned A, and equals to new int. Now in this portion we will define the size of an array. We could also define 100, or but make this array small, so just to show you how it is working, and semicolon. Okay, now over here we have index 0 and index 1 and index 2. Now I want to store a value at index 0. I'm going to store 2, and at index 2, which is the maximum size, I'm going to store 23. And now I'm going to print this. So to print this, write cw tab and A 0. I'm just going to copy this and let's run this. Okay, we know that at index 0 I have assigned 2, and at index 1 I have assigned it nothing, so by default it is 0, and at index I have assigned it to 23, and as you can see at index 2 it has printed 23, which is the maximum size of an array. Okay, now let me show you one more thing, that instead of assigning it value like this. I'm going to initialize it at the time of declaration. Let's say it is 3, so 1, 2 and 3. So there is another method to initialize the size of an array and assign the values to the array like this. So as you can see, we have printed 1, 2, 3, and we could also use for loop to assign values to an array. So let me show you how we can do that. Just going to clear this all of this, and we need a for loop. Int I equals to 0 and I is less than 3 and I plus plus, and I could also use that a dot length, and it is going to go to the maximum length of an array. Now a I equals to console dot to, and convert dot to int 32 console dot read line semicolon. Now what happens that when I is at 0, so the user is going to enter a value and it will assign to the index 0. When I is at 1, it will going to assign the value at index 1 and at 2. And in order to print this, I'm just going to copy this, and over here I'm going to write CW tab A I and yeah, okay, let's run this. Now it is asking me to enter a value. Let's say 1, 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 4. So I have write 1, 2 and 4, and it has printed 1, 2 and 4, and this is just because I have write a space over here. And if instead of writing write line, why don't I just write simple write, because write line will print next line and I don't want that. 1, 2 and 3, so it has printed 1, 2 and 3. So I hope so you have understand how one-dimensional array works. And I could also use string array. For string, just write over here a string and okay, let's say C++, C#, and C. So we could also store a string values to an array. And one more thing I'd like to show you guys is that to store initialize like this, you just have to insert double quotation mark and name, and C++ and C#. So we could also store string values in an array. Now let's go to two-dimensional array or a multi-dimensional array. So multi-dimensional array use where we basically a matrix. If you want to multiply the matrix, you could use multi-dimensional array. Well, in multi-dimensional array, we represent the first value is known as row and second is known as the column. Let me show you how we can define a multi-dimensional array, and I'm going to write over here int and insert a comma over here and write int. Okay, over here I'm going to define the size of an multi-dimensional array. Well, this part represents a row and this represents a column. It has two rows and two columns, just like a matrix. And let me initialize it over here. One, two, three, four. And in order to print this, I'm going to need a two loop. Well, first loop represent print first row, and inside that loop represent a column, and then it goes to the second row, and then inside that loop it prints the column. So I'm not going to use a dot length over here. I'm just going to use 2, and inside that I'm going to need another loop, and let's change this to j. And in order to print this, just write ij. And I need a curly braces over here because I want to print another statement. Yeah. Okay, make sure over here you don't use right line, just right. And over here I'm going to use a right line, and let's me show you how this is working. Okay, so let's say that I is at index 0 and j is at index 0. At index 0 we have 1, and as you can see that this is the first row. In first row we have 1 and 2, and in second row we have 3 and 4, and in first row and first column we have 1, second row, first row and second column we have 2, and in second row first column we have 3, and in second row second column we have 4. So this thing is happening over here is that when I is 0 and j is 0, so at index 0 0 we have 1. Now I increment and j increment, j is 1, and I is still a 0. So at index 0 1 we have this 2, and then 2, and then j increments, and we know that 2 is less than 2, the condition false, so this loop terminates. Then I increments and I is 1, and when I is 1, we know that 1 0 we have 3 and 1 1 we have 4, and then I increments I is less than 2, I goes to 2, and 2 is less than 2, the condition is false, loop terminates. So let us increase the size of an array. Let me show you 3 by 3. One, two, and 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, let me change the size over here as well as over here, and let's run this. So that's how it works. And if I want just 2 rows and 3 columns, I'm just going to remove this one and I'm going to, oh sorry, I forgot to uh, I forgot, just stop it. Basically we have two rows, so I is less than 2. See this how this works. We have 2 rows and 3 columns, so that's where we need rows and columns. We use a multi-dimensional array. It depends upon the condition. So I hope you find it, you understand how single array and multi-dimensional array works. And if you don't understand anything, just do let me know. Just comment it down below. And if you like this video, share this video and subscribe.